We are competing in, we are repeating in, we are believing in. It's time for us to shift our mind from best in the world to best for the world. Make decisions intentional, to take decisions intentional, making decisions intentional. Make decisions intentional, to take decisions intentional, making decisions intentional. It creates a new world to mind a shift, intentionality, perceptuality, conceptuality. We are choosing to shift our mind to best for the world, best for our world. Make decisions intentional, to take decisions intentional, making decisions intentional. Make decisions intentional, to take decisions intentional, making decisions intentional.
Welcome to FiDE, Foundation for Intentional Decision, and today's episode about choice and choices. I'm here today with my colleague Jens Rinnelt. Welcome, Jens, and say hello to the audience.
Thank you, Stellan. Nice to be here again.
Yeah, we have had a lot of interesting dialogues together, you and I. We're now into the 6th program, episode number 6. We started out with a clear intent a couple of weeks ago, and then we moved through both the history of ideas behind what we're going to talk about today, choice and choices, and the history of ideas taking our society from a system thinking world, I would guess that's what you could call it today, into a separated dualistic worldview, which have developed into only valuing what was so-called the outer world. And from that point, we went further on, and we dug into, how can we say it, specific ideas on how we can see the world from a non-dualistic point of view. We explored the tree metaphor, the equal model, all quadrants, all level, which is we can almost say it's a theory of everything, actually, a way of describing life. And from the tree metaphor, we went into the intentional decisions model, the FiDE model, so it's also called, which enables us as humans to have a choice. It empowers us enables the choice as something that is more fundamental than the dominant Western worldview. And then we moved into new ideas of how we can look at assumptions or truths, if we rather like, and then we also elaborated on learning loops. We talked about learning in the first loop, which is in the what's, the second loop, which also embraces the hows, and the third loop about whys, and then the fourth loop about the root and the fundamental assumptions again. And now we're moving into choice and choices, which I believe is extremely interesting. And for those listeners and viewers who haven't followed us before, you please go into the platforms on the podcast platforms, for instance, Acast, podcast, and so on, and find the rest of the episodes. And if you're on YouTube, you probably find it in the same place where you're right now. And today, again, choices. What is your take on choices, Jens? When did you do your first intentional choice? Do you know that?
Ooh, that's an interesting question. When did I do my first intentional choice? I guess when I think when I had to study, or like I wished to study, better said, I didn't have to. I actually chose to study, and I chose where to study. And I think at that point I really started following, for the lack of a better word, an inner voice, or like an inner guidance. I think that was the point of making my first intentional decision.
Do you think so?
No. On another level, I think I have been making choices all my life, but maybe they haven't been that conscious, that intentional. Because I'm think up to a certain point when you go to school, at least that was the case in my life, you are, or I was I was following some of the expectations that I was put in.
There is also an intent.
Yeah, but what I see as a choice is also being aware of the opportunities that I have. So
Okay, so
if
you in the concept of choice, you also put the concept of knowing that there is a choice.
Yeah, that's what
That's awareness.
Would I refer as making an intentional choice.
Okay.
Because otherwise that's what I'm trying to get to, is I was just following maybe expectations of society, of what was assumed, that you go to school for a certain level. At least if you want to go to academia afterwards and want to study, you have to, at least in Germany where I was raised up, have to have at least 13 years of studying, and then you're qualified, so to say, to go to university.
You're qualified to make choices.
Yeah.
Maybe, I don't know.
So what I'm trying to say is that at this point, or up till this point, I was just going with the flow, so to say. And then I really thought about, okay, what do I want to do with my life? I guess at latest, when you finish high school, you have to ask yourself, what do I want to do? What job do I want to pursue? What do I want to work with? And yeah, for me, it was in the direction of studying management, studying business. I always dreamt of becoming a manager. I think that dream
okay,
is...
then if it's okay with you, I would like to pause here for a while, because what I'm thinking of now is that, is a dream also a choice?
Yeah, you like to go deep directly. How can I say this?
Is it going deep to go into your dreams? That is another question. Okay, of course, I'm not here to question your choices in any way, but the interesting thing is that at some point we're either in a deterministic worldview, or we are in some kind of a intentional worldview, and who is putting out an intent? A lot of people do. Your parents probably, they did, and the school system itself, it did, and I don't know, the headmaster of the school did, and all the other kids, they did, and of course they are all mixed, all those intents, and at some point you actually answer, and this is not questioning your answer again, but the first intentional choice you made was at the age of...
Yeah, I guess somewhere around 20.
But what if then the dreams are intentional?
Yeah, and this is what I was thinking of. Like, I think there are two ways of, at least for me, to look at this. The one way is, what is my dream? And do I choose to follow that dream? And that's why I meant with going deep, because if you can also ask the question, what enables me to have that dream? Like, where's that dream coming from? Or where's that idea coming from? Is this my idea? Is this an idea that is floating around somewhere that I'm just able to, tap into? And that is an interesting question for me to, who does this idea belong to? And do I have then the ability to sense the idea? And if I have the dream or the idea, I can make a choice of, do I want this idea to be true, or do I want to follow this path?
So what I'm thinking of here is that when we're talking about intentional decisions, we can talk about something that is, are we aware of that there is a choice? That's the first question, maybe. The next question would then be, do I do my choices consciously or unconsciously or even subconsciously? What is actually taking those decisions in my life? I mean, every day we do a lot of decisions. We take decisions, I don't know how many thousand decisions we take every day. Most of them are more or less habitual. We do it over and over again, and it doesn't take much effort from us, opening a door, taking a step. Some of them are deeply programmed, if deep is now the word, I don't know, but more or less a subconscious way of living the life. And on another level, we can always make a conscious, aware, and also intentional choice and take an intentional decision. I believe there are many levels here when talking about the choice. It's about talking about possibility of choice. Is there a choice or not? And from that point then, choosing on what framework do I have when I prioritize, for instance, or when I take a choice? What do I do? A lot of people say, yeah, maybe we're not that rational as we like to think we are, and maybe we go for some kind of a I don't know, feeling or fear or whatever it is based choice. But also it could also be that we're making an intuitive choice, which I believe is something that we haven't in the Western world, at least not in the society I've been raised, valued at all. And then when we are at the next part, we have, let's say we have chosen, how do I stick with that choice? And the good thing with choices, I believe, is that you can always take a new one. So you don't have to be stuck in it. But on the other side, what if I have made a choice? Then I would like to have the effect of it and not doubting it. Was it the right choice, or should I take another one? And that, because then I lose the power of the choice. So there are many ways to look at the choices. Shall we? Which one should we start on? Should we start on seeing choices?
Yeah, let's start maybe there.
Some kind of a possibility realm or something.
Exactly, and I think you described it quite accurately, or I would agree to this description, as you need to have some kind of awareness of what am I choosing. Because when I look at making a choice in itself, there is this dimension of I'm choosing something over something else, or I'm choosing something in relation to something else. So I'm making a choice between maybe two equal.
Yeah, I understand what you're looking for. You're more or less looking for, am I choosing red or green, or big or small, or whatever it is. That means that you have to have some kind of awareness that there is a choice that you're actually making. But again, let's say that most of the choices we do aren't even in the realm of awareness. Then the question would be then, how can we see choices that are not easily seen?
How can we do that?
How can we do that? That's extremely interesting. First of all, you could say that, do I have to see to believe, or do I have to believe to see? And we're raised in the paradigm which means that you have to see to be able to believe. But when we're talking about choices, I would say it's the other way around. You actually have to believe to be able to see.
I'm thinking of actually we did this Best for the World live broadcasting, and which was created within 2 weeks. So there was not a lot we could see from the beginning, but something that I think we both really focused on very intensely or intentionally in that time was, what is it that we want to create, and how much belief do we basically put in that?
Trust, maybe.
Exactly,
Belief,
trusting in something which we can't see. And I used the metaphor of, we have to walk on a bridge while building it. And then every step that you're taking, you have to trust that the next step you're taking will be on an emerging ground, so to say. So you really walk the bridge while building it. And you have to have trust while taking steps forward. You also had some interesting dialogues about how to deal with uncertainty in the last weeks. Can you elaborate a little bit?
Yeah, I can
on that?
definitely do that. And before I do that, I would say that what we're talking about here now as choice is more or less what is manifesting an idea into something else. Maybe sticking to that choice. And if we start with the possibility realm or whatever it is, I would say before we go into uncertainty, I would say let's start with maybe looking at time. Time as a concept, which is, we believe in the Western world, a linear chronological time. And that is just one way to look at time. And if you're in a chronological time and connect that to choice, the only thing we can do is to choose in the present moment for the next present moment. And this is quite interesting in itself, because then the history is limiting us. But that is actually the choices we have made. So if we connect those two, then we are actually creating some kind of a possibility realm. And this was seen by people for many thousand years ago. For instance, the ancient Egyptians, the old Egyptian, what do you call it? The people who lived maybe 5,000 years ago in Egypt, they had, at least that I know of, at least two times, not only the chronological, it was called Chronos, also the possibility realm called Kairos. And for me, that is more or less connecting those two ideas into one. And from every point in Chronos, there was a Kairos. And the interesting thing then would be looking at the present moment. One could say that all the choices I've made in life have prepared me for this specific moment. And they're also some kind of a definition of myself right now. So they define who I am at this certain moment. But at the same time, I'm also at this certain moment not longer away from another definition than a choice. So for me, time and choice is intervened in a very interesting, not only philosophical, I would say more practical way. How can I use this in my day-to-day life, this knowledge about a possibility realm?
Yeah, and I think as you said, if you have this chronological time, you're actually limited because somehow the past predicts the future. But if you think about, for example, personal development, inner child work, shadow work, you actually take the present moment and go back into memories from your early childhood and change the story that you're attached to, change basically the interpretation that you make out of a certain experience or a situation that you have been in. So, and you change the past, so to say, in the current moment. And that influences, again, how you might go further in the future. So everything is kind of co-created in the present moment.
Yeah, I love this. And talking then about choice, that is also how I choose to look at my history. Do I look at the history or the choices I've already made with anger or frustration or guilt or whatever that feeling could be, or do I look at them with gratefulness and embracing with love every part of my previous versions of myself? And this will, a lot of studies have actually shown that showing gratefulness to what have been, embracing that will also bring joy in the future. So this is things we know, but we haven't found in the Western world so far, I guess, ways of, how should I say, internalize it into the thought models we have. But this is where this interesting thing with the choice connecting to intentional decision comes, because for you who have followed this episode, those programs in this FiDE series, have heard about the intentional decision model and what it enables us to do. And for me, it's actually connecting a new theory of causality with a new theory of choice. That's how I look at it, and that is interesting in itself. And then we can move into the idea of uncertainty, for instance, which is in the predominant Western worldview seen as something that is bad. As soon as uncertainty comes into the room, you get frightened, you lose your stability, you lose your path, you lose your ability to find paths, you lose almost everything. But what really happens is that what uncertainty really brings into the room is a possibility realm, a potential of new choices, a potential of new choices.
Yeah, I mean, I can only agree. It's like, I think what we normally think of when we look at uncertainty is like there's an empty field and we don't know what to do with this, because all the previously established rules, norms, guidances, orientations to give us a direction, or to at least guide us in some way, they are just falling apart. And I can take it actually back to my example when I finished studying. For the first time in my life, I didn't have any kind of environment around me that was telling me like what is the next step. It was always like, at least in the last semesters, for half a year it was clear, like, okay, when do I write my next thesis, when do I write my next exams, when do I have which classes next week. So there was always kind of a plan on what to do next. And once I graduated, all of this basically fell away, and I was standing on this empty field looking at, okay, so what job do I get now? Plus my studies were not preparing me for a specific role. So I had to basically, find that role, or think about like, what do I wanted to do, or where do I wanted to bring in my knowledge now, or create this role. But as you say, it's in some moment can be frightening to come from that perspective and then look at an open space. Mm-hmm. But again, it also is where everything
holds all the possibilities and the potential. And looking at uncertainty and change, I would say if we are able to look at the accelerating change curve as a possibility curve, we have everything to gain and very little to lose. Of course, we will always have to leave something from that is on a lower level to be able to reach some kind of higher level of it. I believe that choosing is maybe both the most difficult thing you can do, but also the easiest thing you can do. At the same time, every choice again is defining you in this present moment, but it's not much longer from another choice. The good thing about choice is you can re-choose, whatever it's called. You can make another choice, and again, of course, if you take a choice on a lower level, that will probably, that's quite high level if you say what do you want to work with. But what if we raise it a level to a higher level and say, what life do you want to live? At some level, that is maybe a more tricky question to give some answers to. But on another level, it's much easier because it doesn't define all other aspects, but this is again interesting because it's having such a frame to your life. What life do I want to live? Both enables ways and takes away ways of living.
What I'm thinking of is also if you're very specific on what you want to achieve, like exactly what life do you want to live, and you already picture it very clearly, I think it can be limiting in a way also that you're, I mean, everything can be limiting and opening up, but I mean, what I want to get at is like, is this already then predetermining what choices to make? Or how do you orient yourself in any kind of situation, and knowing that whatever choice I make here, this is guiding me into the direction that I envision?
Yeah, I like that. I was also thinking about, is there always a choice? The ID model stipulates that it's a fundamental assumption for the intentional decision model that there is always a choice, and then we have to be clear what we mean with a choice. It's not that something that I'm aware of always. It could be something that is hidden in a habit or in a paradigm or in a truth or in a fundamental assumption. It could be hidden anywhere. It could be both subconscious, habitual, and unconscious. But if we at some level hold that maxim true, that there is always a choice, I don't say exactly now, but approximately that there is always a choice, that implies something that is quite fundamental to the world as we know it. And if that is at some level is true, it suggests or even implies that not only is materia fundamental, but also consciousness. Which means then that there is some entity at some level, again, which we haven't described yet in the Western world. We can call it consciousness for a while. We don't know how it works exactly because we haven't looked into it. We haven't studied, and we'll probably, when people hear this, they will say, "Yes, we have disciplines in the science studying consciousness," and then I would say, yes, at some level we have, but up to quite recently, it was limited to brain study, brain science of brains, and we were told more or less that consciousness was something that was located in the head, and which was the brain was the center of it. Today we know that that's not fully true. Even if we're still in the body, we can say that consciousness is also now found, because we have found neurons in the heart and in the what do you call it, stomach, yeah. So that is already at that point suggesting that consciousness is not locally found in the brain, but more in a broader perspective. And still, we again, if we go for the maxim that what we see is what there is, and we say that materia is the only fundamental fundamental parts of the world, then we can't see what consciousness really could be for us, what it really could add into our lives, into our society, into the beauty of the world. We have reduced it to only the physical matter.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a valid argument in that, because if you cut open the body, you will probably not find consciousness. So, but it's still at the same time, we are accepting that we have a self-identity, what you referred to earlier, that all the choices I have made so far, they give me an image of myself, that it's basically just an image of how I see myself. It's not a physical existence.
But this is actually contradicting itself, because if we have the worldview only saying that what we see is what there is, how do you then describe yourself? What is you? I mean, if I raise my hand, I say this is my hand. Here it is. Where is, like, then I've separated myself from the body again. So that's at the same time. What happened if I don't separate? Then I am the body and consciousness in it in the in the same sentence. That is quite interesting in itself, because at some point we say that the only thing that exists is what we see, and again I'm talking about parts of myself as not being me. My hand. Who is owning the hand? I am. Who are you? I don't know. Do I even exist? So this is interesting. So there are contradictions that are at really easy to see, that we haven't seen. This is a contradiction, I would say, is very very easy to find. We even believe more in someone telling us how we feel than feeling by ourselves. If I have some kind of a problem, I go to a doctor and I ask them, how do I feel? Instead of asking myself, how do I feel?
Yeah, and I think it's so interesting that we accept these kind of physical developments, and we believe that we as people have to grow, and then up to a certain age we grow in our bodies, and then we grow perhaps in different ways. And then what I'm trying to say is, like, in some way we accept that there's a physical growth or physical development that we accept, but then there are also more mental concepts of, like, yeah, we go through childhood, we go through adulthood, we go to puberty, but where is exactly the border of that development? You can't really tell. So what I'm trying to say is, like, these are more mental concepts that we use to describe, and to some degree he has accepted that. And speaking of consciousness, because that is something I would describe as totally metaphysical, it seems like we from the beginning, we don't even allow a discussion about might there be a evolution or a development in consciousness, because, as you said, it's very difficult to study. Actually, it's very difficult to grasp, at least from a perspective of, if you only can measure.
Yeah, if you only can measure, then you have a problem. If that is the only tool you have, I don't know, a ruler, a clock, measuring times and measuring spaces, then of course there will be a problem.
Yeah, and I think that's
sorry.
that's what I think is where I see in the Western world we have really difficulties to talk about these inner development, so to say, consciousness development. It is kind of ruled out from the beginning, but without any really reasoning.
No, there is maybe no good reason at all. And we in I guess it was in the episode number 1. I guess when we talked about the history of ideas connected to choice and to worldviews and so on. We also realized that the worldview in the Western world, based upon the inner and outer world, the Cartesian dualism, was not only some kind of, we came to the conclusion that we have mistaken an inner subjective idea to become an outer, and this is so funny, outer objective reality or truth, which is in itself quite interesting. How come that we have come to the point in believing actually in some kind of it's a belief system that but we don't see it as a belief system. We see it as a truth. So we have mistaken this inner subjective idea of measuring as something that is an outer objective reality, which also means that there are a lot of both new ideas and ancient ideas on how to talk about inner development. If inner is now the word, we can talk about conscious development. I like that. And evolution of consciousness, and that also raises again, of course, the questions of what is consciousness. And to be able to do it, we have to believe that there is something. Otherwise, we can't study it. So that's again, do we have to see to be able to believe, or do we have to believe to be able to see? And I would say believing in consciousness is for me, it's not hard at all, because I believe, again, belief is probably fundamental in this sense. I believe that there is consciousness that is fundamental at the same level as materia, and this all comes from the fundamental assumption that there is always a choice, which then leads to some kind of an alternative way of thinking about inner and outer. You spoke about metaphysical and physical, which is a good way, I guess, to describe the consciousness and the materia, and then we can use the inner and outer definition to another realm, or another way of thinking, and that would be the inner world as something that is dynamic, and the outer world to something that is static. And we talked about this in the first episode. So if some of you listen now and want to dig a little bit deeper into it, please visit that episode. What then comes out is actually from intentional decisions, the intentional decision model language. What we have then is first, we can call it the phase, I don't know what to call it, but first step would be having a possibility of choice, seeing that there are choices and maximize them more or less. You want, again, as you said, if you don't believe that there are any choices, then you have a problem in itself. So if you see only one or even zero choices, you don't believe that there is a choice. So you have to believe that there is a choice, maybe choices, to have one.
Yeah, and I think the dynamic between physical and metaphysical is if I take a physical pen, then I only have, it is only one pen, it's one physical object. But if I take now a metaphysical perspective, I can put myself around the pen and look at it from different angles, and soon it becomes something else. It becomes something I can use, to whatever I can do with the pen besides writing with it. So there is a way of, using your fantasy, your metaphysical perspective to look at a physical object and look at it from different angles. And that is what I'm trying to get is what you're saying is like, how can I see more opportunities?
And you can also say that at some level you could say that everything is a fantasy, and on another way to put it is that nothing is a fantasy, because as soon as you put in a new perspective, a new perception of this pen, it's part of the pen. So what it can't be measured, for instance, is the feeling of holding a pen, or the feeling of writing a book with this pen, or the feeling of writing a bestseller with this pen. And what we are suggesting here is for you who are listening or viewing this episode is that not only is there a pen, but there is also an idea about it. And the idea about that pen is also the pen.
And I think speaking about consciousness development, as undefined or loosely defined it actually is, I think with a higher level of consciousness, you are able to see more opportunities.
More ideas.
Exactly.
That's a good way to talk about it. What if the pen would be red instead of, in this case, blue? What if that pen would be given to someone who writes a poem? So you could actually find a story about the pen, and that story is also the pen. And the interesting thing here is that this is again so easy to see if you embrace it a little bit. You don't have to be deep into any philosophical questions or stuff like that. It's quite easy to see that for some persons the pen is nothing more than a pen. For someone else is the freedom of speech. And it's even called the pen club, I guess, the club of the pens. Isn't it the freedom of speech club? It's called the pen club, I guess. It's the journalist club for defending the free speech of the word of the free. Yeah. So within this lies everything.
There's a whole story and narrative around it that is actually much more powerful in some way than just the tool to write something.
The pen itself can actually save a person's life. So why am I saying this? Because as soon as you've heard this, I'm going to say in just a minute or something, or half a minute, is when you've heard it, you can't unhear it. So, for instance, if you get something stuck in your throat, which means you can't breathe, and you can't get it out, and people come trying to Heimlich maneuver you or whatever they do, and they don't get it out of the throat, there is one more way to actually survive, and that is if someone picks up a pen and puts the pen right into your what do you call this, the throat, or whatever. It's not throat, what's it called?
I'm lacking the English word as well.
Yeah.
And don't try that at home.
No, don't try that at home. But again, this could actually save someone's life if you know this. And now that you heard it, you can't unhear it. So you will always know that a pen can save a person's life. That's interesting in itself.
Mm.
A pen could also be used for many things. For instance, we have already talked about writing a bestseller or a poem or a beautiful song or whatever it is. And it is also the freedom of speech for someone. It could also be seen as the way of finding perception as perspectives. So if you listen now or you're looking at this program, please pick up a pen, hold it between your thumb and your what do you call this finger?
Index finger.
Index finger between your thumb and index finger on the middle of the pen, and you hold it a little bit downwards, like in height of your stomach, and you look at it from above, and then you start doing circles with it, circles with clockwise. So when you look at this from above, you see the pen. You can do this, Jens, at the same time as me. Take the other pen and clockwise. Okay. So now we have like a clockwise circle going on, just going on with a circle. And as you circle this pen, you move it upwards, 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 high up, passing your breast, passing your head, and you continue to do this all the way up until it's up over your head, and then you look at it. Okay, so what is the direction now? This is spooky. Counterclockwise. Again, you can try it again. Start from here, down here. Yeah, I know. It is odd. So if you listen on
I
this...
have to do it again.
You have to do it again to leave it. Yeah, this is so odd.
And I've seen it, but I still don't believe it.
You've seen it, still don't believe it. Okay, so once more. So everyone that listens and looks at the YouTube clip now or listen to the podcast. What you do is you take a pen. You hold it between your thumb and your index finger on the middle of the pen. You put it perpendicular, to yourself, and you look at it from above, and then you start doing circles with it, and the circles are going clockwise. And when you have this circling, you do like more or less a spiral, so you go upwards, 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 the same. Don't change anything, and you put it up above your head, and when you now look at it, what is the direction?
The clock has changed.
Yeah. The time is going backwards. So easily done and so spooky.
Could this really be true?
Could this really be true? I love
it
it.
at home.
Try this one. You should
Exactly.
definitely try it home. Fantastic, yeah. So the metaphysical and the physical world are connected in some way. As soon as you realize that, you also realize that a description only giving you the physical world is a limited description. It only holds causality within that realm. That means as long as you only believe what you see, you can only find causality in that realm, which is, from my point of view, an extremely limited worldview.
And I just had an experience. I mean, before you showed me this fantastic experiment, when you were talking about what else you can do with the pen, I had this clear image of what are you going to say in my head already, even though you didn't say what you're going to say. So my question is here, how is this even possible? Because
What?
you have to have the image of what are you going to say, what you can do with the pen. It already was very visual in my head, and I could see what you're going to say next. So how is this even possible? That's my question, because we didn't communicate before. We don't know what.
How do you know that? And what worldview didn't we communicate?
Yeah, I mean, I said we didn't
In the
use
physical
language.
in the physical
Exactly.
worldview, we didn't communicate. That doesn't say that we didn't communicate.
Yeah, I mean, and of course you can say to yourself, okay, maybe I have seen this example before, so I kind of connected the dots, and everything that you're going to say was leading to
that
this.
is one description.
I have experienced maybe of this, or I've seen
Or
somebody
you have
doing
intuition.
something
I don't know.
before. Yeah,
Again, this is something we in the Western world don't know much about. I wouldn't say this is like this or this is like that, but what I can say is that limiting ourselves to one description, which is more or less analytical, rational way of thinking, is not only limiting ourselves, it's limiting life. And what then happens is that if there is any other communication than the physical communication, then that kind of communication don't see time and space as we see it. When you and I sit here, we believe, you and I, that we are quite close, right? We have a half a meter or maybe a meter at maximum between us. We believe that is a space. Is that closer or far away?
for me it doesn't really matter.
Yeah,
I mean,
but
in physical distance, that's maybe quite close.
Okay. So even if we're into physical measuring, we say quite close. Okay. So if you would have been in, say, Australia now, would that be far away or would that be close?
Yeah, I mean, physically it would be more far away.
Okay. So as I am a mathematician and a physicist from start, I say it's approximately the same. In terms of the size of a human being like 1 meter approximately, when you talk about approximate things, you could do quite an easy approximation. You say that you go into a 10 potency. If for instance, if you say I'm higher than 1 decimeter but lower than 10 meters, that means I'm approximately 1 meter height. Okay. So what is my width? Okay, more than 1 decimeter and less than 10 meters, approximately 1. So approximately 1 times 1 times 1, that's approximately the size of a human. How much do I weigh? Do I weigh 10 kilos? No. Do I weigh 1,000? No. I weigh approximately 100. So in that size, I believe that as that kind of a human, I have a sense of close is less than 1 meter and far away is on the other side of the planet. But if you go into a universal time and length scale, I would say it's approximately the same. It differs a couple of potencies. What do you call it?
potencies.
Potencies, but not much.
No, and I think we have all experienced something like this. An example from actually our work is when we had decided to write a report, a white paper actually, then we haven't been in the same room to write it, but we connected through technological possibilities, and while we were in the same document writing together, I think we both felt that we were quite close, quite connected, quite, dealing with focusing on the same issue, and thereby having a very mental closeness. Instead of, I guess it would have been different if we both would have decided to you write a page, I write a page at different times. So what I'm trying to say is, like, we really experienced, and ask yourself if you have experienced something like this when you tap into a space where you really feel connected with people, really feel like you're speaking about the same language without even talking to each other.
So when we talk about choice and choices and what is possible or not, I would suggest that person who thinks about, do I have a choice or not, can I go one step behind that choice? What is the assumption that creates that realm of possibilities that I want to have? For instance, if I believe that this distance we have between us is a short distance, and a distance to the other side of the planet is a long distance, then it's limiting me in many ways. Of course, if I'm going to visit you in Australia, I would probably only be able to go there maybe once every 10th year. And if we sit half a meter from each other, I can hug you as long as I want, more or less. But realizing that maybe that distance is approximately the same gives new opportunities to think of a person, of a relation, and can I get used to another way of thinking that opens up more choices? Can I get used to another way of thinking that opens up new ways of choices? I think this is quite crucial in having a choice. Can I find ways that I can, I don't know what the right words here, but exercise my ability or my capability in seeing opportunities or seeing choices or seeing new ways forward. So when someone says stop, I say, where do I now go?
Do we have an example of how to practice it, or how to train that ability?
First of all, I guess you have to train your language. How do I express things? The language is what is putting out the ideas and manifesting them. How can I use, how should I say, how can I use concepts that are already present, that are already there? For instance, time. We can use that concept of time and see how that makes things possible. For instance, if something you find interesting to do, and I say, okay, let's do this in one day, whatever it is, setting up a live broadcast. 2 weeks, maybe I say. I don't know. Okay, never mind. But the interesting thing is that for some people, that time limit is too short. So they say, no, it's not possible because we don't have the time for that. It's too close in time. We don't have that time. Okay? And then the question would be, what happens if I take this concept of time and stretch it a little bit? I say, okay, let's say 4 weeks then. Would that be possible? Maybe you say maybe 4 weeks. Yeah, it could maybe be done in 4 weeks. Okay, then I say 6 weeks. Yeah, then it could easily be done. So time is an interesting phenomena. When you think about time, you can use the dimension of time to make something possible. And then you have to be a little bit cautious so you don't put it too far away, because then it's not possible again because it's too far away. No, we can't say anything about that. That's too far away. You hear people say this all the time. You hear them saying, no, I don't have the time. That is when it comes close to them. And then if it's too far, you hear people say, I can't say anything about that. That's too far away. So you have to find a person's or your own, if that person is yourself, have to find your own time span where things are possible, and maybe see if you can stretch that. You don't have to stretch it much. But what if something that is entirely possible in 2 weeks, and you think as much as you can in 2 weeks almost equals 1 week? Done.
I'm thinking of that. I think time is a fascinating concept in itself. What I'm thinking of right now is like, I feel like we have been both in a space quite recently where a lot of ideas are coming up to us, or we are at least seeing a lot of ideas, let's call them ideas. And my question here is basically, when is the timing right to feel or see that an idea can be implemented, or maybe that's my question. Do you understand what I'm trying to say?
I think I understand.
Because sometimes we have an idea and then it really takes a month before something happens.
Yeah, okay. So I would say this is another, connecting to choice, something, I wouldn't say different, but it's another dimension of choice. And that is, when is the choice finding its own context? When whatever it is that want to emerge, it will emerge, I guess. And so whatever it is that want to emerge is the idea. So when the idea wants to emerge, it has to have a context for that idea to emerge. And the context is something you create. Are you ready to create the context for this idea? Maybe you're ready for the idea itself, but not for the context of it. So it's almost like you have to find various dimensions and connecting them. Maybe if I take an example, if you have an idea of saying, I would like to, I don't know, play the piano. I never played the piano. I would like to play the piano. Then you also, the idea of it is one thing, and finding the context to do it. I mean, it probably means that you have to be in the possibility realm of pianos for a while. You have to be there with melodies and with the harmonies and with the piano itself, feeling it, embracing it. That context will have to meet with the idea. And you have to be willing to have both the idea and the context together.
So how long will it take for you to learn the piano? To be able to play?
Okay, that means that you have to have, again, an idea on what is being able to play. If you want to be a concert pianist, I don't know, 10,000 hours. No, I don't know. But if you want to play for house need, like on Christmas and so on, it has to have some kind of a context in forms of dedication, but not into. You don't have to only do that.
No, I understand what you're saying. You have to find different dimensions, as you said.
Are you willing to be a concert pianist? What do you call it? Pianist.
Yeah.
Do you want to be in that context? I wouldn't want to be in that context. I have other things I want to explore in life than playing the piano, but I would like to play the piano.
So what I'm hearing from you is that there are a lot of dimensions coming together, and in that way it forms kind of a complex environment or situation where a lot of things have to come together. But one of the aspects is definitely motivation of effort, and then also, I guess,
Trust in the choice. Maybe.
trust in the process also. Like,
Yeah, trust in the process, definitely. But also trust in the choice.
so if I decide I want to play the piano, then at some point I will play the piano. Or I'm already playing the piano.
Or maybe you've already played the piano.
Or played, yeah.
So again, using time here is interesting because, again, if we take the concept of time, putting it into the choice of playing the piano, is playing the piano something that is ahead of you all the time. As soon as I can play the piano. As soon, what is as soon as? When I can play the piano? When is when? Then you have to have a lot of energy going into controlling time. And most of us don't put that energy into it. So maybe you should use a language which is, I play the piano. It's not something I'm going to do. I'm already doing it, and I've already done it maybe.
Yeah, that is...
Can I see myself playing the piano?
That is, again, a lot related to vision and using your imagination, but also not only using the imagination, it's again not something that is in the future.
No,
but
it's manifesting. Again, we can take the pen. We had this fantastic experience with the pen here before. As soon as we put the idea of the pen at the same level of the physical pen, something is happening with the pen. Something is happening with the piano. And I'm looking forward to your first concert. No, I'm just kidding.
I played the saxophone.
You played? Oh, right. That was quite a funny thing. Yeah.
There's something else I wanted to ask you, because before the show we talked about a lot of ideas, and then I asked you, how do you know when you have a good idea, or how do you know when an idea is good? And you said something really interesting.
What did I say?
Do you remember? You said that you can feel it in the stomach.
Yeah, wherever it is.
Oh, yeah,
in the body.
And then that is interesting to me, because it brings us back to making choices, of course, but also knowing which choices to make. And there are, again, different levels maybe, or different ways of how you can look at it. You can look at it from a very rational point,
Yeah,
but
that's
I think
one way to do it.
rationality has, that's what I tried to get at earlier, is like, if you look at a very straightforward cause and effect relationship, then maybe it is limiting.
No. Hold your horses here, because if you're talking about causality in the realm of the physical world, yes.
Yes, exactly.
But if you broaden the causality, then you will see that there are connections to things that you didn't see before. So I think the causality is always there, but maybe it's wider than you think, or I would say it is wider than you think. Whatever you think, it is wider than you think. So whatever worldview you have, I would say the causality is bigger than that worldview. That is probably something you could show with mathematics, I guess.
Yeah, and so what I'm trying to say is that from maybe a rational point of view, you don't see that connection, but
that's right. That's right.
On an intuitive level, you maybe are more able to tap into this space and feel this connection.
Yes. Could you say like this? If you're talking about rational choice, what if I am? Okay, I'm going to pose something here. See if you agree on this. We make choices all the time. So far, so good. We make choices. We believe that we are rational in the choice making. At some level, we know we're not. But then we have made a choice, and then we want it to be so rational. So we re-rationalize it afterwards to be able to say it was rational, which is quite unrational, because it's like having the worst case scenario of the best case scenario. I mean, the best case scenario is maybe using your intuition, and the worst case scenario is using your intuition, then saying it was a rational choice. That is crazy, actually. A lot of, I think this is quite human, or at some level, but also quite Western worldish. We make choices and we want to have them as rational as possible, so we rationalize them afterwards. And to be honest, a lot of choices we do are stupid.
No, and I mean, they're
from a
fantastic,
rational point of view.
fantastic experiments by Dan Gilbert, who exactly explained this dynamic. Like we believe we chose rationally, and then afterwards we justify basically the decision we have made. And my question here is like, what is so attractive on appearing as rational?
Because I was always falling into the trap here. Okay, so I believe, instead of saying it is, I believe that this is connected to the limited causality. Because if we are supposed to be rational, because that's the worldview, that everything is, the causality is in the what and the how realm, the measurable world, and then we take choices or make choices or whatever we do that are based on other things, feelings, irrationality in itself, intuition, I don't know, whatever. How can you justify a choice not being rational? Never. It has to be rational, because otherwise it's not a choice, right? And you don't want to have not doing it. If you're supposed to be some kind of a rational person, the most rational thing is that you make choices, right? It's quite irrational if you don't do it. So from the rational point of view, you have to make choices, and all choices have to be rational. So you're actually stuck in making rational choices rational.
So in my worldview, that means that we have to open up to a wider, more complex causality that you referred to earlier, but also opening up to something that might seem from a rational point of view as esoteric, as spiritual, because in my simple rational, I think, explanation for these kind of things is that you believe in something which you can't see.
Yeah, but
I mean, that's
now you're raised in Germany and in the Western worldview, so that is irrational. You can't do that.
Exactly.
End of story. And
I just did it.
Yeah, you just did it. So you're not a little boy. So the thing here is, I would say, putting those in opposition. That is what the separation of the inner and outer world does to us. It sets it in opposition, saying what is not rational is, as I said, not rational. so you're finding yourself into like a booby trap. So you can't get out of it. It explodes in your hands, more or less. As soon as you try to do something outside the rationality, it says kaboom, and there are no explanations for it. How could it be? And the only thing we can do is try to find a rational way. So again, you sitting there on half a meter away from me, having a clear view in yourself what I'm going to say the next coming minutes or whatever I don't know how soon before, is by definition not happening.
Yeah,
but then it is still is. So yeah, so it's definitely something that is part of people's life, and either we go on the map In the Western worldview, the intellectual paradigm, that map is based upon measuring, or we go on the reality. We can't say anything else than it's real. So which one do you choose? The map or the reality? I would say let's go for the reality and then maybe find a better map that includes what we experience. Because otherwise it's not relevant. So maybe we should call it relevant instead of rational. Is it relevant? If you have a feeling, is that feeling relevant to you? Say a strong feeling that you envision me saying something. Is that relevant for you?
I guess that depends again on what.
Yeah, but in this case, the specific case we just spoke about, was it relevant for you?
Yeah, definitely.
Then it should be part of the map.
Yeah, and I think you put it nicely. Like, what do we choose in the end? Like,
there is some kind of, I don't know, entity, where we can call it consciousness, we can call it conscious agent, we can call it whatever we call it. There is something there that needs to be expressed and that needs to be seen, or at least believed in to be able to be seen, or at least hold as possible to be believed in to be able to seen. What it is? Yeah, maybe some people during evolution of man has found the answer. I don't know.
And I mean, we stumbled upon the issue of language a couple of times already during this program. And in some level, I believe there's no language for this experience. And if we rationalize it too much, we will lose again, the quality of an experience of how do I feel, how do I experience a situation. Because that is something only you can determine, and only I can myself know how it feels, and then decide, do I value this, do I not value this, is this something I want to experience more, and how can I do this perhaps.
Yeah, I like that description of. Yeah. Is there anything else we want to add on choice and choices that we haven't touched upon here?
I'm thinking of, I think we already touched upon it, but when we looked at a different way of already looking at inner and outer world, of dynamic and static.
Yeah, and that's right. Yeah, I see where you're going now.
The question is at what time, at what moment, or what kind of entity makes something which is dynamic static?
And the others from the other side, something static to dynamic. Can it even be fully static? We don't know. Can it be exponential dynamic? I don't know. Maybe the directions. That's the interesting thing. Then, if we have some kind of a dynamic inner world and a static outer world, if that's the definition you're referring to, we did in the episode 1, which is an alternative definition of an inner and outer world. The inner is the dynamic and the outer is the static. That means that at some point it can't be both. But the most interesting thing is the directions of it. Either we go from a lot of dynamics into a less dynamic state, or even static state, and the other direction then will be from a more or less static state into a more dynamics and even high dynamic state. I would say, if we use the terminology we have had with the inner and outer world with dynamic static, we more or less have the wave, and we have the point, or the static of material I mean, this is the duality we have seen in, for instance, the photon and the electron and so on. And the best way we have in the mathematical realm to describe this is the Schrödinger equation. If this is really connecting to this, I guess, but I don't fully say it is, because I haven't dug into that much. But I would say it's appealing, at least, to have such a practical description of causality connected to choice as the ID model, intentional decision model, and at the same time having the possibility, at least, to reformulate it into a mathematical description that could be used for cosmological reasons. And then I would say quantum mechanics is a good way to take that step, at least from the point we're standing as a world right now. That would mean that there is some kind of a possibility of realm. We can call that the Schrödinger equation. And there is something that collapses the Schrödinger equation. And the most common interpretation of that is the Copenhagen interpretation, saying that consciousness is collapsing the Schrödinger equation. So this is something I would like, at least, to dig into the next coming years, maybe decades. We need a new cosmology because the previous one we've had have reached its limit. It says that there is an objective observer, and from the objective observer we can look at any system without interacting with it. But that is having so much limitations within it. So a lot of theoretical physicists today have, I wouldn't say abandoned the previous worldview fully, but are seeking at least new ways forward. One way is, for instance, if you have any setup where you have an objective observer and you have a set, a system you're looking at, one way to include this observer is to expand this set or system up to the biggest system as we know, which is the universe. That puts actually the observer into the system, and then we shrink it back. That's one way you can mathematically do this, to be able to get the observer into the system, which leads to a co-creator instead of an objective observer. You're affecting and the system as you look at it.
Yeah, and I mean that's exactly where I was leading to, because also what you're saying is, in my interpretation, that with how you look at the system already creates an interpretation of the system. So already
this is the Jens Rinelt the Jens Rinelt interpretation. I love it. I suggest,
what I'm saying is you can't
spot on.
Can't separate yourself, and
No,
even by looking at the
Mm.
system is you're already part of the system. And also what you see in the system is a, first of all, I think, a choice that you make, but also this choice influences what you actually see.
The perception creates reality. We can easily see this. For instance, if we look at within the terminology of sustainability, for instance, we're talking about an environment as it is something else than us. So how come that we look at something and without realizing that it can only be an environment if there is something to which it is an environment, that it's already in the terminology. So to be able to see an environment, you will have to be part of it. But no, the environment is something else. Something else, not us. It's something that has to be saved. And that's we stumble on our own lack of I don't know, capability to see what can already be seen if you just open your eyes. So I mean, yeah, a lot of things has to be revealed here.
Yeah, and I think that is also a way of us as humans dealing with this huge complexity, is to reduce it to, in some way, be able to understand it, explain it, relate to it, maybe to make it just simpler. But I think in doing that, we lose a lot in the process.
We lose a lot of information, and not only information in itself, but also the power of complexity, the inner power of the system. It's lost as we reduce it, and maybe not everything should be understood.
No, and I'm thinking here of the quote from Einstein that said that time was just created so not everything happens at the same time. And then if you think about it, that it gives me an explanation of why we have come up with these kind of concepts, to make it a little bit simpler, a little bit easier maybe to understand and relate. But essentially everything is happening at the same time in this moment, and it's determined, at least from my interpretation, from the Jens Rünnelt interpretation, by my choice.
I love this. I would say let's call this a day.
Yes, I'm also very satisfied with the choices that I made.
Yeah, and the choice we made this evening to really sit down and have this conversation and dialogue upon choice and choices. What can they make to us, and what can we make with them? How can we look at every choice we have and enlarge it in some way, or make it greater? And by doing that, we're also making ourselves greater, and being thankful for the choices we have made, and also the choices to be made. Both saying thank you for yesterday and also thank you for tomorrow. And at the same time, we're actually saying thanks for today. And by those words, I would say thanks for joining us again at FiDE. We will be back. And if you want to support us, please share this information, or whatever we can call it, episodes, with the ones you love, and the ones who need, and the ones who should actually think of choices in new ways. That could be yourself. So maybe you should go back and look at this episode, or listen to it once more. And if you want to support us on another way, Patreon is one way. Please go to patreon.com, best for the world. And FiDE is coming back with new episodes. And FiDE is also short for Foundation for Intentional Decision, and in Latin it means trust. So have trust, we will be back. Isn't that a good ending?
I couldn't have said it better. Thank you so much, Stellan, for guiding us and exploring together.
Yeah, guiding.
Choices.
We're like exploring. No one knows what will come. Thank you, and see you again. Bye.
Competing in, we are repeating in, we are believing in. It's time for us to shift our mind from best in the world to best for the world. Make decisions intentional, to take decisions intentional, making decisions intentional. Make decisions intentional, to take decisions intentional, making decisions intentional. It creates a new world to mind a shift, intentionality, perceptuality, conceptuality. We are choosing to shift our mind do best for the world, best for our world. Make decisions intentional, to take decisions intentional, making decisions intentional. Make decisions intentional, to take decisions intentional, making decisions intentional.